Welcome back. In some breaking inputs coming in, the Ambassador of the Republic of Cuba to India, His Excellency Juan Carlos Marsan, has convened a press conference on the occasion of the upcoming vote in the UNGA on Resolution 79-7, which calls for the necessity of ending the economic, commercial and financial embargo imposed by the United States of America against Cuba. The ambassador has said that Cuba aims to end the unfair economic policies of the US. He went on to say that 10 days before Biden resigned as the US president, the Americans had to remove Cuba from the list of countries that support terrorism. However, Marco Rubio in fact reimposed it. Joining me on the broadcast is my colleague Aditya Vadhavan. Aditya, could you take us through the details of the statements of the Ambassador of the Republic of Cuba?
Well, absolutely. Shivani, to see the Ambassador of Cuba has gone on to say that these US blockade economic policies are absolutely unfair and discriminatory in nature. And, he's made a big statement that, he's saying that, 10 days before, Joe Biden, former US president, exited, his Biden administration had taken out Cuba from the list of the countries that support terrorism. But however, when US President Donald Trump sworn in as the American president, he, the current US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, put back Cuba into that same list of the countries that support terrorism. So indeed, it is a big statement from the Cuban ambassador to India, and from here on, he also made a statement wherein he said that all these discriminatory economic policies which the US is taking is to isolate Cuba. So it is a big statement that is coming. So indeed, this clearly now shows the frosty relations between the United States and Cuba. And from here on, it needs to be seen how things unfold, given in the coming days, because Cuba is a neighbor of it's very close, geographically very close. It has a close proximity with the United States, and we could expect some major breakthrough. It needs to be seen whether the US side will, comment any, release any statement regarding this or not. This needs to be seen. Shivani, back to you.
Right. Now let's cut across to his address, in fact, over there.
Ronnie, I would like to explain. Before 1959, before the Cuban Revolution, the US companies dominated completely the Cuban economy. 70% of the land in Cuba, productive land, was in the hands of the United States Free Company and others. 50% of the electricity supply belongs to the US companies. The banking system was managed by the US banks. And if you see to any sector in the Cuban economy, they were a huge presence of the US companies. When the Cuban Revolution triumphed in the first year in 1959, one of the decisions was to nationalize all these properties. And we offered to many countries, because French companies, from other Italian companies, Spanish companies were also in Cuba. And we offered a compensation. They accepted, except US. They said not, because they believed at that time that in few days this revolution cannot resist in front of the US. And they are going to defeat the revolution in few days, and they are going to come back to Cuba to recover their ownership of these sectors. But it didn't happen. And we are still 65 years later. We are still stand up, and won't happen in the future. So through these lawsuits, any citizen, not only Americans, even Cubans that went to US after the revolution, they can apply for recompensation, and they can present in the US courts these demands. It's open. And this is a treaty not only for Cuba, for any foreign company that invests in Cuba. They can say, you are investing in the land that belongs to the United Free Company, so you can be demanded in the US courts. This is the situation. is trying to avoid any kind of foreign investment in Cuba and to also to put pressure on the foreign companies not to participate, not to invest in Cuba. We can continue. Well, the travel, because I explained that the US citizen cannot travel to Cuba by free, but they also expand these restrictions to other countries. I explained, for example, there is one example. On September 30, 2024, a high official from Honduras was denied renewal of her ESTA visa with her Spanish passport because he had traveled to Cuba. The Europeans have this ESTA visa. It's an electronic system for travel authorization. If you want to go to US from Europe, or a European want to go to US, they can apply for e-visa, and in the moment they can reach the approval, and he can travel to US. But if you have traveled to Cuba, when you apply for the e-visa, they deny it. They say, no, you don't have the right to apply for ESTA visa, for the e-visa, because you before traveled to Cuba. So you can get an appointment in the consulate, you can go, they will interview, make an interview, and at the end they will deny the visa to US because you before traveled to Cuba. Is it the real situation? When I said that we almost to reach 5 million visitors to Cuba, 1 million, more than 1 million were from Europe. Nowadays, it's not more than 300,000 per year. The people are scared to go to Cuba because they lost the opportunity to travel to US, and of course there are a lot of connections between European countries and US. It's not the case of India. Don't scare. So you are not in this season. You can travel to Cuba and then to US. It's not a problem. But unfortunately, not many Indians travel to Cuba. Last year was 20,000 only. We will put more attention in order to, to increase the number of Indians traveling to Cuba to discover this wonderful country, so far geographically speaking, but so close in feelings. Because once you get Cuba, you will see that the people love also India, the history, the visit of Fidel to India in 1973, in 83, the close relations based on mutual respect, cooperation, solidarity, and friendship that we have built in these 65 years. So it's one of the points we would like to increase. But now, these measures that to difficult the possibility for Europeans to travel to Cuba has an enormous impact in the possibility for Cuba to also to recover the same figures that we have before COVID. And the tourism, as I said, is a third sector in the Cuban economy today. Yes. A video, just to relax.
Íbamos con nuestra mentalidad puesta en eso y lo logramos. Para mí fue una experiencia bastante bonita, porque a pesar, también como dije, de dificultades con el tema del COVID, que te limitaban muchas cosas, bueno, en este tipo de competencia, que es el caso del Mundial de Relevo, la World Athletics da un premio, creo que son de primero al octavo lugar. Como nosotros, debido a que ganamos ese campeonato, recibimos un premio, por el cual en estos momentos aún no lo tenemos en nuestras manos. Ya ha pasado 3 años, porque fue en mayo de 2021, debido a temas de bloqueo y que se dificulta por temas de banco, etcétera, etcétera. Y verdaderamente que nosotros como atletas nos dificulta mucho estos tipos de cosas, porque es una necesidad que tenemos como atletas recibir nuestro premio. Bueno, nosotros prácticamente casi no hablamos de este tema, porque como atletas a veces como que nos cohíbe un poco, porque es bastante triste que un atleta de otro país que nos conozca de tiempo nos pregunten debido a estas cosas mismas, y nosotros le digamos así, como que se sorprenden, como que wow, ¿cómo le puede pasar a usted? No sé, porque ellos sí tienen la exteriores y aún premios de pocas finanzas también nos dificulta. Es decir, que quisiéramos que se resolviera porque verdaderamente lo necesitamos.
It's an example that not only the economic sector are suffering this problem. An athlete, they cannot receive their award because of the blockade. Also it happens in education, in health, it affects the social security, everything. All Cubans, more than 10 million people are suffering this problem. And it's something we would like to also to show you. Well, as I explained, next October 28th and 29th, Cuba is going to submit this resolution condemning the blockade in the United Nations General Assembly. Last year, we get the support of 183 countries that vote in favor of the resolution presented by Cuba. Only 2 countries against was United States and Israel, and 1 abstention, Moldavia. The rest of the country supported the Cuban resolution, and we are going to do the same this time. But the US government, they are trying to pressure the different governments, mainly in Latin America, in Europe, in Africa, in order to change their votes and not to support the Cuban resolution. Yesterday, the Minister of External Affairs of Cuba, Bruno Rodriguez, he made a very clear press conference in Havana denouncing that they are sending, the US State Secretary, they are sending letters to the different Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to the different president, prime minister in all the world, pressuring, making some, threatening them not to vote in favor of the resolution, that they are going to impose some sanctions to those countries that support Cuba in the General Assembly. So we can understand that nowadays, in the current world, you can meet the people this way. You know, it's like an emperor communicated to the slave that you cannot vote in favor of Cuba because I will send you to work in the, you know, cannot understand that. But this is the way they are communicating with all the governments that pressuring in order to change their determination to support Cuba in the next votation that is going to take place next week in the General Assembly. Let's continue. Some figures how the blockade is an impact in the Cuban society. For example, for the fuel that we require for the national electricity system in Cuba, well, we have to wait a lot of money because we cannot import this oil from the US. Of course, we should go to another nations, including in Europe or in Africa, in order to provide oil to Cuba. This is more costly, of course. It's more expensive for us. And also the vessels that is in charge of the transportation of oil in the world, they are also under these sanctions. So they try not to go to Cuba, and if they go, they must to pay because Cuban country risk has been increased in the last years. So another one. With the cost of 17 minutes of blockade is equivalent to purchase cost of the medication that their children needs for some specific disease. In the report that Cuba presented to the General Assembly in September, and I will share with you as well, you can find many examples how the blockade impact in the health system in Cuba. We, for example, were able to reach the infant mortality in Cuba was around 4.2 per 1,000 per 100,000 births in Cuba. Nowadays it's around 7. And it is because we cannot have the appropriate medication in order to attend the pregnancy women in Cuba. And this also happened combating cancer and many other diseases in our system. We suffered that we were able to reach so amazing results in medicine that we are already keeping Cuba, but not the same stage. We are losing the possibility to save human life in Cuba because of the blockade. Let's continue. Or for example, the possibility to purchase all the insulin that we require in the health system in Cuba is equivalent to 14 hours of the blockade because of the damage. Continue. Also, as I explained, I already explained this, the international collaboration with Cuba, because Cuba provides many medical services to many countries, and we receive some money for that, for these services. Of course, you compare what the quantity or the value that Cuba offers these medical services in comparison with the European or even from the US, is cheaper, because the essence is how to provide to those population medical services. But we receive some financing, some income to our economy. And they are trying to cut also this possibility. Why they are trying to attend to this medical international cooperation that Cuba paid to many countries. We can continue this. This is how much Cuba have lost because of the blockade. In 1 year, for example, from March 2024 to February 2025, the damage has been estimated 7,556,100,000 US in 1 year. In 1 year. You can ask yourself how many problems Cuba can be solved if we have the possibility to waive this money in food, providing food for the Cuban population, purchase oil to the national electric system to our country, or for example medication that we require, or many other transportation, and many other for education. Per month is 629,675,000, and per day more than $20 million per day. And if the cumulative damage in all these more than 60 years is 170,677,200,000. That's the quantity. And it is, I can say, superficial. We cannot count. What is the cost of one human life? How much? When we lost a children because we don't have the appropriate medication to combat the cancer, how much? So you cannot count in figures. And to finish, my friends, well, a part of this pressure that the US government is putting on in all the governments, we are pretty sure that the international community is going to support once again this, the resolution that Cuba is going to submit to the General Assembly next October 28 and 29. Because the people do believe that the truth is in the Cuban side. And the Cuban population deserves the opportunity to live without this policy of the blockade, and to expand all the opportunities and possibilities that our political, economic, and social system assure for our population. Of course, we are pretty sure that India, once again, is going to support this resolution, as India has done in the last 32 years, and because we believe also in this strong relationship that this year is arriving to the 65 years of diplomatic relation between the two countries. But once again, thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for attending this press conference today. And we, Lupe and Mikey, are open to answer any questions or to hear any comment from you on this topic. Thank you so much once again. And thank you to the Press Club for hosting this conference today. Thank you, my friends.
Yeah, I will 1 second. One person ready here. A mic here is, sorry.
Welcome to the Press Club, Your Excellency. My name is Tripti. I'm an independent journalist. I understand from your presentation that Europeans are being penalized by the Americans for visiting Cuba, but that's fortunately not the case for Indians. So in the last 10 months that you've been here in India, have you been able to figure out the reasons why only